Words can cut deep, but silence can too. Silence can shatter you. It's louder than words, more brutal than an argument, more suffocating than a locked door. When a man you care about, whether it's your partner, a close friend, or even a family member, suddenly stops talking, it doesn't just hurt. It erases you. It makes you question everything. Did I do something wrong? Does he even care? Why is he doing this to me? And that's the worst part. The silent treatment isn't just the absence of words. It's a form of emotional starvation, a calculated way to leave you anxious, lost, and desperate for a response that may never come. But here's the truth. No one tells you. You don't have to play his game. Because in the next few minutes, you'll understand exactly why his silence hurts more than his words, the psychological tricks behind it, and most importantly, how to break free and reclaim your power. And if you've ever been through this, if you've ever felt that sting of being ignored, I want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments. Let's start a conversation, because silence, that stops here. Now, let's get into it. 1. Silent treatment triggers. Psychological pain. There's a moment every woman remembers, a moment when she realizes she's been locked out, not physically, but emotionally. He's there, yet he isn't. His silence stretches between them like an abyss, swallowing every word, every plea, every whisper of connection. At first, you think it's just space. Maybe he needs time to think. Maybe he's overwhelmed. But then, the silence lingers. It grows heavy, pressing against your chest. You replay every conversation, dissecting every word, trying to pinpoint where it all went wrong. And here's where it gets dangerous. Your mind starts filling in the blanks. You imagine the worst. Maybe he's with someone else. Maybe he's decided you aren't worth the effort anymore. Maybe, just maybe, you were never enough to begin with. But here's the truth. It was never about you. Psychologists have long studied the effects of social rejection, and the findings are chilling. Silent treatment doesn't just hurt emotionally. It triggers the same part of the brain as physical pain, the same region activated when you break a bone, when you burn your skin, when you're physically attacked. Except this wound is invisible, and that makes it even harder to heal. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This is where Stoicism comes in. Love is an emotion, but your self-worth must be a decision. When someone withholds communication, they are testing your reaction. They want you to spiral, to chase, to lose yourself in the void they've created. But a high-value woman? She doesn't break in the face of silence. She remains still. This doesn't mean indifference. It doesn't mean you don't care. But you refuse to beg for the bare minimum. You refuse to collapse under the weight of uncertainty, because love, real love, is built on mutual effort, not on one person waiting in agony while the other holds all the control. The woman who knows her worth does not sit by the phone, watching the minutes tick by, hoping for a message that may never come. She doesn't search for answers in his absence. She finds them in herself. When you are ignored, you have two choices. You can shrink, diminishing yourself in an attempt to fit into his silence. Or you can expand, filling the space. He has left with your own presence, your own power, your own life. Think of the ocean. It does not beg the shore to return. It simply continues to move, to flow, to exist in its vastness. A woman who understands her worth does the same. But how do you get there? How do you silence the overthinking, the self-doubt, the suffocating belief that if you just did something different, he would talk to you again? You start by reclaiming your focus. The mistake most women make in this situation is giving him too much power. They become fixated on his silence, as if his withdrawal defines them. But what if, instead of waiting, you redirected that energy? Imagine this. Instead of checking your phone, you go for a run, feeling the strength in your legs, the rhythm of your breath. Instead of overanalyzing his absence, you fill your space with people who actually value you. Instead of wondering what he's thinking, you invest in something that makes you feel alive, your passion, your work, your own growth. Do you see the shift? The moment you stop reacting to his silence, you take back control. There's a reason silent treatment is used as a psychological weapon. It creates emotional dependency. It makes you feel powerless. But the moment you recognize the pattern, you break it. You don't reach out first. You don't try to force an explanation. You don't shrink yourself down just to fit into the small space he's offering. Instead, you stand taller. You become so deeply rooted in your own self-worth that his silence no longer dictates your reality. And then something fascinating happens. When you stop reacting, when you stop feeding into the cycle, you force him to confront his own behavior. Because here's the truth men rarely admit. They expect you to break. They expect the pleading, the over-explaining, the desperate need for validation. But what if you don't? When you carry yourself like a woman who cannot be undone by silence, it unsettles them. It disrupts their control. You might be thinking, but what if he never reaches out? What if he never talks to me again? Then he was never yours to begin with. A man who values you does not leave you in emotional limbo. A man who genuinely cares will not use silence as a weapon. He will communicate, even if the conversation is difficult. So the question isn't whether he will come back. The real question is, will you even want him when he does? When you step back, when you focus on yourself, when you realize that your life is too rich, too vibrant, too full for someone who plays mind games, the answer becomes clear. You are not meant to live in silence. You are meant to be loud in your own existence, to take up space, to be undeniable. A woman who understands this does not chase. She rises. 2. It's an emotional power play. At first, the silence feels like space, like a pause. Maybe he just needs time to think. Maybe he's overwhelmed. But then it stretches. It lingers. It turns into something heavier, something colder. And you realize it isn't just silence. It's control. You wait, staring at your phone, willing a message to appear. You craft responses in your head to conversations that never happen. You replay old memories, searching for the moment everything shifted. But here's the truth. This was never about what you did wrong. This was about power. Silent treatment isn't just an emotional response. It's a tactic. A way to create a power imbalance where he pulls away and waits for you to come running. And when you do, he wins. He knows you need his validation. He knows his absence holds more weight than his presence. But a woman who understands her worth, she doesn't play games. In the philosophy of Stoicism, there's a lesson that applies here. If someone is able to provoke you, recognize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. Epictetus. He wants a reaction. He wants you to feel unsettled, to second-guess yourself, to reach out first. And the moment you do, the cycle resets. But when you don't, when you refuse to chase, refuse to let his silence dictate your emotions, you strip him of that power. A woman once told me a story. Let's call her Emma. Emma was in love with a man who had mastered the art of emotional withdrawal. Whenever there was conflict, he wouldn't argue. He wouldn't explain. He would simply disappear. Days would pass, then weeks, and every single time she would break. She would send a message, then another, then another. She would apologize for things she hadn't done, just to make the silence stop, until one day, she didn't. She woke up, stared at her phone, and made a decision. Instead of reaching for the screen, She reached for her sneakers. She went for a run, feeling the rhythm of her breath, the strength in her legs. Instead of checking if he had seen her messages, she checked into a bookstore and lost herself in pages that made her feel alive. Instead of waiting, she started living. And when he finally came back, expecting the usual pattern, she wasn't there to receive him. That's what happens when you break the cycle. See, silent treatment thrives on your need for closure. It plays on your craving for answers. But a woman in her power doesn't need external validation. She understands that silence is an answer. It's the only answer she needs. And when she stops playing, the entire game collapses. There's a shift in energy when a woman pulls away from a manipulator. He can feel it. Suddenly, his absence isn't making her weaker, it's making her stronger, and that terrifies him. Because now, he has to do something he never expected. He has to chase. But here's where it gets interesting. By the time he comes back, by the time he finally decides you're worth speaking to again, you've already outgrown the version of yourself that would have accepted him. That's the ultimate power move. A woman who commands respect doesn't beg for attention. She doesn't chase ghosts. She doesn't waste her beauty, her energy, her light on someone who thinks affection is something to be rationed. She understands something fundamental. Real love does not operate on scarcity. A man who values you will not make you wonder where you stand. He won't need to withdraw to maintain control. He won't use silence as a leash, pulling you back when it suits him. So the question isn't, how do I make him talk to me? The real question is, why am I giving my heart to someone who treats me like an afterthought? Because the moment you stop waiting, the moment you fill the silence with your own voice, your own passion, your own self-worth, you win. You step into a life where you are the one choosing, who gets access to you, who gets to share your time, who is deserving of the energy you bring. And the man who thought he could control you with silence, he fades into the background, where he always belonged. If this resonates with you, comment, I take back my power, I own myself. Let this be the moment you reclaim your voice. 3. Silence feeds self-doubt and overthinking. The silence stays longer than expected. At first you brush it off, telling yourself he's just busy, preoccupied, or dealing with something on his own. But then, doubt creeps in. It seeps into the quiet spaces, whispering in your ear, making you question everything. Maybe he's upset. Maybe he's lost interest. Maybe he's found someone else. And that's when the spiral begins. You start analyzing every interaction, every text, every conversation, leading up to the moment he withdrew. You play his last words over and over in your head, searching for hidden meanings. Was your joke too much? Did you say something wrong? Were you too distant? Too available? Too much? This is what silent treatment does. It traps you in your own mind, turning you into a prisoner of overthinking and self-doubt. You replay scenarios that don't exist, conversations that never happened. And the worst part? The longer the silence stretches, the more power you give it. But here's what no one tells you. His silence is not a reflection of your worth. It is a reflection of his inability to communicate like an adult. A man who values you, who genuinely sees you, will never leave you drowning in uncertainty. He won't weaponize distance. He won't force you into a mental battlefield, making you second-guess your every move. He will talk. He will clarify. He will respect the space where your feelings exist. A woman I once knew spent years trapped in this cycle. She loved deeply, gave endlessly, but every time conflict arose, he would vanish. No words, no explanation, just emptiness where his presence used to be. And every time she would make excuses for him. Maybe he needed time. Maybe he was processing. Maybe she was being too demanding. And then one day, she realized She had spent so much time inside his silence that she had forgotten the sound of her own voice. She had dimmed herself, softened her edges, shrunk her own presence just to accommodate his emotional absence. And for what? A man who could disappear whenever it suited him? A man who would rather let her spiral than offer a simple sentence of reassurance? She stood in front of the mirror that day and saw someone she barely recognized. A woman who had been so afraid of losing him that she had lost herself instead. That was the last day she ever let a man's silence dictate her worth. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This is where Stoicism meets self-worth. You cannot control when someone chooses to withdraw, but you can control what you allow that silence to mean. A man who disappears without explanation is not a mystery to be solved. He is a decision to be made. And the decision is simple. Do you let his absence consume you, or do you fill the space he left with your own power? A woman who understands this does not overanalyze the silence. She does not sit by the phone, waiting for a message that may never come. She does not let her beauty, her intelligence, her radiance be diminished by the uncertainty of a man who cannot meet her at her level. Instead, she chooses herself. She fills her mind with things that expand her, not things that shrink her. She moves, creates, grows. She focuses on her passions, her friendships, her goals, and something extraordinary happens. The moment she stops obsessing, the moment she steps back into her own power, the silence loses its hold. Because now she isn't asking, "Why is he ignoring me?" She's asking, "Why was I so willing to let my peace be disturbed by someone who doesn't even respect me enough to communicate?" A woman who has mastered her mind does not chase answers in places where respect does not exist. She does not drown in the void left by an emotionally unavailable man. She rises. She thrives. And when he finally realizes what he lost, she's already gone. If this speaks to you, drop a comment below. I choose myself. My worth is not up for debate. Let this be your turning point. 4. It's a sign of emotional immaturity. A man who truly values you will never make you wonder where you stand. He will never make you question your worth through silence. Because love, real love, is about clarity, not confusion. Presence, not absence. Yet, here you are, checking your phone, rereading old conversations, wondering what went wrong. But let's pause for a moment. What kind of man chooses silence over communication? An emotionally mature man? No. A man who respects himself and others, understands that conflict is a part of any relationship. He knows that silence is not a solution, it's an escape. A shortcut for those who lack the courage to face emotions head-on. Emotionally immature men use silent treatment as a shield. They withdraw when conversations get difficult, when emotions run deep, when responsibility knocks at their door, and, instead of facing it, they vanish. Because silence is easier than accountability, they tell themselves that avoiding the conversation is better than dealing with discomfort. But in reality, they are avoiding growth. And a man who avoids growth will never be capable of sustaining a deep, meaningful connection. But you are a woman who deserves more than emotional absence. A woman I once knew was trapped in a cycle with a man who mastered the art of disappearing. He would go silent for days, weeks, sometimes months. Then, without warning, he'd reappear. Charming, apologetic, pretending like nothing ever happened. And every time she let him back in, because she thought this time would be different, except it never was. She started noticing a pattern. Every time she brought up something serious, something real, he would shut down. If she expressed her needs, he'd act as if she was being dramatic. If she asked for reassurance, he'd withdraw. If she got upset, He'd twist it to make her feel like the problem. But the real problem? He was never emotionally present to begin with. One day, she finally saw the truth. She was not in a relationship. She was in a loop, a never-ending cycle where she was always waiting, always wondering, always hoping. And that's when she made the hardest, yet most powerful decision of her life. She stopped waiting. She walked away. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with a deep sense of peace. Because she finally understood. She wasn't losing him. He had already lost her the moment he chose silence over honesty. And when he came back, expecting her to be the same woman who once tolerated his vanishing act, she was gone. That's the thing about a woman who chooses herself. She does not play the same game twice. There is nothing more powerful than a woman who realizes she deserves a love that speaks, a love that stays, a love that does not require her to beg for communication. And let's be clear, walking away is not weakness. It is the ultimate act of strength. Because leaving someone you love, someone you once saw a future with, is not easy. But staying in a cycle that diminishes your worth, that is far more painful in the long run. Seneca once said, "He who is brave is free," and there is nothing braver than walking away from someone who refuses to meet you where you stand. So now, ask yourself this: are you in love with him? Or are you in love with the idea of who he could be, if only he changed? Because the hardest truth is also the most freeing one. He is not changing. If he wanted to, he would have. If he valued you, he would have made it clear. If he respected the connection you shared, he would never have made you feel like an afterthought. A man who cannot communicate his feelings is a man who cannot hold space for yours. And a woman who knows her worth does not beg to be seen, does not chase for clarity, does not wait for a man to figure it out while she puts her own heart on hold. She rises. She thrives in her own presence, in her own beauty, in her own undeniable power. She walks into the world not hoping to be chosen, but knowing that she is the one who does the choosing. She does not settle for empty spaces, for unanswered messages, for emotional ghosts. She does not shrink herself to fit into his comfort zone. She does not let her light dim for someone who prefers shadows. And the moment she realizes this, the moment she decides that silence is no longer an acceptable language in her love story, she is free. And when he finally realizes what he lost, she's already gone. If this speaks to you, drop a comment below. I walk away with strength. I deserve a love that speaks. 5. How to take back your power. There's a moment when everything clicks, when the fog of doubt lifts, and you see things exactly as they are. He is not ignoring you because he's deep in thought, struggling with emotions, or processing his feelings. No, he is silent because he knows exactly what his silence does to you. And the moment you realize this, you take your power back. Because here's the truth. Power is not in his silence. Power is in your response to it. A man who values you will not leave you questioning your worth. He will not make you wait in emotional limbo. He will not withdraw just to see if you will chase him. That is not love. That is control disguised as emotional distance. But a woman in her power does not beg for answers. She does not break under silence. She thrives in it. I knew a woman once, someone radiant, someone whose presence could light up a room. And yet, for years she was caught in a cycle with a man who would disappear every time she needed him most. He had a pattern. Whenever things got serious, whenever emotions got real, he would vanish. Sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks, and every time she would wait. At first, she told herself he just needed space, that he would come back when he was ready. But deep down, she knew. This was not space. This was punishment. A way to make her feel small. A way to teach her a lesson. that he could pull away whenever he wanted, and she would always be there when he returned, until one day she wasn't. She woke up, looked in the mirror, and saw herself clearly for the first time in years. She saw a woman who had spent too much time making excuses for a man who never showed up for her. And in that moment, something shifted. She no longer felt the urge to text. She no longer needed to know why. She no longer wanted to give her energy to someone who only valued her presence when it suited him. She took back her power. Instead of sitting by her phone, she booked a solo trip to a city she had always wanted to visit. Instead of analyzing his silence, she immersed herself in life, new experiences, new people, new adventures, and something incredible happened. The weight lifted. The overthinking stopped. The need for closure disappeared, because she became her own closure. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have control over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This is the essence of emotional freedom. You do not control whether a man chooses to be silent, but you do control what you make his silence mean. Do you let it shrink you, or do you let it liberate you? A woman who reclaims her power stops making a man's inconsistency her burden. She does not try to decode his behavior. She does not fill in the gaps he leaves behind. She does not chase a man who cannot even offer her the basic courtesy of communication. She detaches. Not because she is cold, not because she no longer cares, but because she understands. Her time, her peace, her energy are too valuable to waste on someone who does not reciprocate. And here's what happens when you truly step into your power. The moment you stop reacting to his silence, he notices. Because silence is only effective when it elicits a response. When you stop feeding into the cycle, when you stop chasing, when you stop caring about whether he texts back, the dynamic shifts. Suddenly, the power he thought he had, it's gone. And when he finally reaches out, when he suddenly remembers how radiant, how magnetic, how irreplaceable you are, you will see the truth, not through his words, not through his explanations, but through your own clarity. You will see how much time you wasted overthinking, how much energy you gave to someone who was never emotionally available, how much of yourself you lost, just to keep someone who never truly saw your worth. And when that realization sinks in, you will no longer want him back. Because a woman who has stepped into her power does not settle for men who use silence as a leash. She moves forward, with grace, with confidence, with a deep, unshakable knowing that she is worthy of a love that speaks, a love that stays, a love that does not require her to question her place. And so, she walks away, not to prove a point, not to make him regret, but because she finally understands that her peace is more valuable than his presence, and the best part, she never looks back. If this resonates with you, drop a comment below. I take back my power. My peace is mine to protect. Let this be the moment you reclaim your worth. 6. Focus on becoming the best version of yourself. A man's silence can be deafening. It can pull you into overthinking, into questioning your worth, into chasing answers that will never come. But the moment you realize that his silence is not a reflection of your value, only his inability to communicate, you begin to shift. You stop waiting. You stop shrinking. You stop making his emotional absence the center of your world. Because here's the truth. The best way to respond to silent treatment is not with words, not with anger, not with desperate attempts to fix what isn't yours to fix. The best response is elevation, growth, becoming so undeniably radiant, so deeply fulfilled that his absence no longer leaves a void. There was a woman I knew, smart, elegant, the kind of beauty that turned heads without effort. She loved deeply, But she loved men who disappeared. One in particular had perfected the art of withdrawal. Every time she needed reassurance, every time things got serious, he would go silent. And every time she would wait. At first, she rationalized it. He's just stressed. He'll come back when he's ready. But deep down, she knew. This wasn't about stress. This was about power. And by waiting, by holding space for a man who never showed up for her, she was giving hers away. One day, she made a decision. She stopped waiting for his attention. She redirected that energy inward. Instead of checking her phone, she started checking in with herself. What did she want? What dreams had she put on hold? What parts of herself had she neglected while she focused on keeping a relationship alive that was never truly there? She started going to the gym. Not for him, but for herself. She started dressing up. Not to impress, but because she felt good in her own skin. She started pursuing that career move she had been too distracted to focus on. And as she did, something incredible happened. She became whole again. Not because he came back. Not because she finally got the closure she once thought she needed. But because she became the woman she was always meant to be. The kind of woman who does not wait for love that is uncertain. The kind of woman who radiates self-worth so deeply that no man's silence can shake her. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." The same applies here. Waste no more time analyzing his actions, trying to figure out his mindset, hoping he'll change. Focus on being the best version of yourself. A high-value woman doesn't ask, "Why won't he talk to me?" She asks, "Why am I allowing this to affect me?" She doesn't sit in the shadows of his inconsistency. She steps fully into her own light. And the moment she does, the entire dynamic shifts. A woman who is deeply immersed in her own growth does not beg for attention. She doesn't chase a man who can't even offer basic communication. She walks through life with the kind of quiet confidence that commands respect, not through force, but through presence. And here's what happens next. The man who once thought he could control you with silence, he notices. Because your energy is different now. You no longer feel small in his absence. You are thriving without him. And that unsettles him. Because men who use silent treatment expect you to fall apart. They expect you to chase, to question, to break under the weight of uncertainty. But when you don't, when you become even stronger in his absence, he has to face a reality he never considered. You do not need him. And that is the most powerful position you could ever be in. But by the time he realizes it, by the time he tries to re-enter your world, something profound has happened. You have outgrown him. Because a woman who has stepped into her full self, who has embraced her own beauty, her own intelligence, her own worth, no longer has space for a man who cannot match her energy. And that's when you know you were never supposed to wait for him. You were supposed to become so complete within yourself that his silence became irrelevant. That is power. That is self-worth. That is what it means to rise. And when you do, the world notices. 7. Master emotional detachment. Play the game. Better than him. There is a shift that happens when a woman stops reacting. When she no longer lets a man's silence dictate her emotions. When she no longer waits for a message. When she no longer lets uncertainty unravel her peace. This shift is called emotional detachment. And once you master it, no man, no matter how charming, no matter how much you once wanted him, will ever have the power to shake you again. Because here's the truth. Men who use silent treatment want one thing: a reaction. They withdraw, not because they don't know how to communicate, but because they know exactly what their absence does to you. They want you to overthink, to wonder, to chase, to try and fix things that were never broken to begin with. But a woman who is detached She does not break. She does not chase. She does not try to control the uncontrollable. She observes. She understands. And she walks away with grace, not resentment. In Stoic philosophy, there is a powerful concept. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Seneca. And that's exactly what happens when you allow yourself to be consumed by silent treatment. You are not suffering because he is silent. You are suffering because of what you make his silence mean. You create a story in your head, one where you weren't good enough, one where you did something wrong, one where his absence is your fault. But when you step back, when you remove the emotional weight from the situation, you see the truth. His silence is not your problem to solve. A high-value woman does not internalize another person's emotional immaturity. She does not try to decode mixed signals. She does not chase clarity from a man who is not offering it. Instead, she shifts her energy. She stops asking, "Why is he doing this?" and starts asking, "Why am I allowing this to affect me?" She stops waiting for answers that will never come and starts living her own life, fully, unapologetically, beautifully. And that is when everything changes. Because emotional detachment is not about being cold or bitter or pretending not to care. It is about knowing that your peace is worth more than someone else's inconsistency. It is about training yourself to respond differently to situations that once triggered you, to replace reaction with awareness, to remove your emotional investment from people who cannot meet you at your level. And when you do this, when you embody this, the power dynamic shifts entirely, because men who use silent treatment expect you to fall apart. They expect you to chase, to explain, to plead for answers. But when you don't, when you meet silence with calm detachment, when you simply move forward, radiant and unbothered, they lose their control. They wonder why you're not reacting, why you're not desperately trying to pull them back, why you seem completely unaffected by what was once their strongest weapon. And that's when they panic. Because a woman who is detached is a woman who can walk away at any moment and mean it. She does not need closure. She does not need explanations. She does not need to be chosen, because she chooses herself first, and that is the ultimate power move. So now ask yourself, are you willing to let go of the need for validation? Are you ready to break free from the cycle of waiting, overthinking, analyzing every silence? Are you ready to become the kind of woman who is so deeply secure in herself that no man's withdrawal can ever shake her again? If you are, drop a comment below. I am untouchable. My peace is mine to protect. Let this be the moment you reclaim your emotional freedom. You've seen the pattern. You've felt the weight of his silence, the sting of uncertainty, the endless cycle of overthinking. And now, you know the truth. His silence was never a reflection of your worth. It was a reflection of his inability to communicate, his emotional immaturity, his need for control. But a woman who knows her value, she does not beg for words. She does not chase closure. She does not sit in the shadows of someone else's inconsistency. She chooses herself, again and again, without hesitation. And that choice, it's not made once. It's made every single day. Every time you refuse to let silent treatment manipulate you. Every time you redirect your energy toward your own growth. Every time you replace overthinking with action. This is your power. Your mind, your emotions, your peace, they belong to you. No one should have the ability to take them away with silence. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." And that is what you are doing right now. Let his silence be his burden, not yours. Let his absence be a lesson, not a wound. Let today be the day you stop shrinking to fit into spaces that were never meant for you, because you are too vibrant, too brilliant, too undeniable to ever be erased by someone who cannot even hold a conversation. Now, I want to hear from you. What moment made you realize you deserved more? Share your story in the comments. Let's make silence powerless together.